Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to use the chainless starting stitches to make the edges of your crochet perfectly straight every time. So this is a swatch of, a typical method of working back and forth in rows. Normally, when we work back and forth in rows, we always have to work a starting chain or a turning chain to get up to the height we need to start working across the next row. And this can kind of be a little bit problematic depending on the stitch that you're using, because if you look at this one side over here, on this side of my swatch, I've done one of the methods where that you work your starting chain or turning chain, and then you don't count it as a stitch, and you work the first regular stitch into the same stitch your chain is coming out of. And this, while it does give the correct height, it leaves you with this kind of wobbly edge here because every other row has that turning chain kind of bubbling out of the edge. So this gives a kind of wonky looking edge. And the other commonly used method for chaining and then turning is to count your turning chain as a stitch and work the first stitch of the row into the next stitch after the stitch that the turning chain comes from. And this produces closer to a straight edge, but then you get these kind of little gaps and holes in your ends of your rows because the turning chain is, first of all, not straight, and secondly, it's not as thick or the same shape as a regular stitch. So down here I have this problem shown in double crochet. Up here's a little bit of half double crochet, and for the smaller stitches it's not as noticeable. For example, up here in single crochet, the turning chain bump on this side is really small, and on this side the turning chain gap is almost non-existent just because it's such a short turning chain. I only chained one for my turning chain on the single crochet. So for the single crochet, it's really not as noticeable, and you won't really even be able to see a lot of difference. But for some of these taller stitches, it can be a problem because naturally we want our edges to be straight, but we don't want any of these gaps. And so then, sometimes we might use this method over here to get an edge with no gaps, and then it's not straight. So I'm going to show you how to use the chainless starting stitches to begin your row of crochet. In some of my other videos, we've looked at chainless starting stitches for beginning a round and getting an invisible join. But for this video, I'm going to show you how to use those stitches to get a perfectly straight edge with no bubbles from turning chains and no gaps in between your turning chains. Alright, so here is my foundation chain, and I'm going to start with some double crochet. So I'm going to begin with a chainless starting double crochet. Now, to do this into a foundation chain, you just want to make sure that when you go to insert your hook into the chain, that you are not just inserting into this top strand, but into the top and the middle strands, and that will make a more secure stitch. So if you've watched any of my other videos on chainless starting stitches, then you'll be kind of familiar with this. We're going to stretch the loop on the hook until it's about the height of a regular double crochet. I'm going to hold on to the back of that loop with my finger, and then I'm going to bring the hook towards me and then back behind to make the equivalent of a yarn over with that extended loop. And then I'm going to insert into my first chain, not skipping chains and then working into like the third one. We're going to work into that first chain that the loop was coming from, but we're going to insert into not just the top strand, but the top and the middle strands, and yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through the first loop and that double strand loop from the extended loop that we yarn over with, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. Now, the very first chainless starting double crochet on the foundation chain row is not going to be quite as perfect generally as the rest of them, but that's okay because it will still be a whole lot less noticeable than a gap or a bubble, as I'm calling them in this video. So now I'm just going to double crochet in each of the rest of the chains across my row. Alright, so there's my first row, and as you can see, the chainless starting double crochet over here looks just like a regular double crochet. So now I'm going to turn and work the next row. So I'm going to turn, I'm going to stretch the loop on my hook till it's at least the height of a regular double crochet or maybe a tiny bit taller. I'm going to put my finger on the back of the loop to hold it still on my hook. Then I'm going to yarn over with that extended loop by bringing the hook towards me and then back underneath. I'm going to insert my hook into the same stitch the loop was coming from, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So again, just like a regular double crochet in appearance, and I'm just going to double crochet all the way across. And then when I get to that chainless starting double crochet from the previous row, I'm just going to work right into it as normal. So there is our second row. I'm going to do another one to show you one more time. So I'm going to turn, stretch the loop on my hook, hold on to the back of the loop with my finger, bring the hook towards me and back underneath to yarn over with the extended loop, insert my hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then finish like a regular double crochet by yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And then I can just double crochet all the way across. And then when I get to that last stitch, that'll be the chainless starting double crochet from the row below. And I'm just going to work into the top of it as though it were a normal stitch. There will be the 2 strands, across the top of the stitch, just like any other normal stitch. So if we lay this down, kind of even it out, you'll see that the edges, now this one right here is a little bit tilted because it hasn't been worked into from the top yet, but the edges of the sides of our crochet are straight, yet we don't have any of those gaps from the normal turning chain because there are no turning chains. We're replacing the turning chain with the chainless starting double crochet. So I'm going to work a few more rows of the double crochet with this method just so you can see a little better what it looks like. Alright, so here's several rows of double crochet, so you can kind of see this a little better, but as I said before, there are no gaps and no bubbles around the edges, and the edges are completely straight. So now I'm going to show you how you can do the same thing with half double crochet. And for half double crochet, we'll need either a locking stitch marker, a safety pin, or a hairpin, a bobby pin, some kind of item that is kind of U-shaped or whatever that we can kind of slip around the stitches that is still going to be removable. So preferably a safety pin, a bobby pin, or a locking stitch marker like this one. A split ring stitch marker will also work. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to turn and we're going to work our chainless starting half double crochet. So again, to do this, we're going to stretch the loop on the hook till it's about the same height as a half double crochet. And then we're going to take our stitch marker and just kind of loop it around that extended loop like this. I'm going to close mine, but you don't have to close it if you're using something that can't close. So I'm going to hold that stitch marker up against the back of my hook, and that will help keep the stitch from getting untwisted, because with a half double crochet, if you do not have the stitch marker to hold it, then it will become untwisted and it will kind of fall apart to a point. It won't unravel, completely, but if it comes untwisted, then it will not look like a half double crochet and it will be kind of stretched out. So what we're going to do is use that stitch marker to hold the loop at the top still, and I'm going to hang on to it by holding it up against the back of my hook. I'm going to yarn over with that extended loop, insert my hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 1, 2, 3 for all 3 of those loops, and then the stitch marker is just going to stay there and hold that loop still, because I'm going to show you what happens if it comes untwisted. If it comes untwisted, then it will kind of come around like this, and then it will not be a half double crochet anymore. So we want to make sure that it does not come untwisted. Now once we work our second half double crochet, then it won't be able to do that. But you don't want to let go of it or let it just, go its own way and do whatever it wants to do until you have worked another stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and work half double crochet across the rest of my row. And now that you can see, once I've worked the second half double crochet, this cannot untwist. But the stitch marker will still help us work into it on the next row. So I'm going to half double crochet all the way across. So down here I'm going to work into the top of that chainless starting double crochet from the row below, because my previous row is double crochet. Now I'm going to turn and work another chainless starting half double crochet. So I'm going to grab a second stitch marker. So if you're going to be working back and forth in rows, you'll need one stitch marker to hold the one on the previous row, and then a second one to hold the chainless starting half double crochet on the current row. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to stretch the loop until it's slightly taller than a regular half double crochet, and then kind of hook that stitch marker around the extended loop. I like to close mine, and then I'm going to hold it to the back of my hook. So now I can yarn over with the extended loop and insert into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook, and that is our first chainless half double crochet. Then I can just work regular half double crochet all the way across. So now here we are to the last stitch of the row, which is the chainless starting half double crochet from the previous row, and I'm just going to work a stitch into it normally, making sure my hook is following the same path as that stitch marker. And then once this stitch is complete, I can take the stitch marker out because we don't need to hold that stitch anymore. It's now secure because we worked into the one, into the top of it, and that will hold it completely, securely. So now I can use this stitch marker for the next row. So I'm going to stretch the loop on my hook and then place that stitch marker around the loop and hold it to the back of my work, or to the back of my hook, I should say, with my index finger, and then work that chainless starting double crochet in the same stitch, and then half double crochet all the way across. And then when we get to that chainless half double crochet from the previous row, we're going to just work into the top of it normally, like we would work into the top of a regular stitch, and then remove the stitch marker. And we can now use this stitch marker for the next row. So I'm going to do one more row of half double crochet, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so now I can lay this down and show you. And on this section as well, with the half double crochet, the edges are as close to being perfectly straight as they can possibly get, and there are no gaps from any turning chains. So now I'm going to show you how to do it with a single crochet. Now with a single crochet, the difference will not be as noticeable, but I'm just going to show you anyway, just in case you might want to use it. So for a single crochet, we don't need a stitch marker, and the single crochet is actually the easiest one to do here. So for a single crochet, we're just going to stretch the loop on the hook a little bit and work a regular single crochet in the same stitch. That's just how we work a chainless single crochet. I'm going to single crochet all the way across, And of course, I'm going to single crochet in the top of that chainless half double from the beginning of the previous row. I can take that stitch marker out now. And now for the next row of single crochet, I'm again going to just turn, stretch the loop on the hook a little bit, work a regular single crochet in the same stitch, and then single crochet all the way across. And then we'll work into the chainless single crochet from the beginning of the row just like a normal stitch, because it is a normal stitch. So that will also give us perfectly straight edges, but it won't be as noticeable of a difference because when you use a turning chain with a single crochet, you can't see it very much anyway because the turning chain is so short and the single crochets are so short. Alright, so here is my finished swatch, and you can see our nice clean straight edges on both sides of our swatch. And I also want to mention that when you're using a chainless stitch to begin your row, that is not going to inhibit the stretch of the edges of your work. Whereas if you use a turning chain, if you are using the method where you don't count the chain as a stitch, then it will have stretch to it. But if you do count it as a stitch, there is a limit to how far those chains can stretch, because chains don't have as much stretch as regular stitches. So here are our two swatches side by side, and you can see that the chainless stitch method produces a much cleaner, straighter edge that, in my personal opinion, looks a little bit neater than having a straight edge with gaps and holes in it, or a wavy edge with no gaps and no holes. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you have ever used a chainless stitch in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.